This video is part of a book club discussion of Ray Franz's book, Crisis of Conscience. If you are or ever have been one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you will find this series of videos extremely interesting. Crisis of Conscience is a book banned for more than 7 million people. They are not allowed to read or possess the book according to the officials of their religion. Those who have been caught with the book have been disciplined, and for some it has meant the loss of their friends, family, and faith. Why is this book so controversial? It doesn't contain the usual controversial topics like money, politics, or sex, but what it does contain are the honest words of a very courageous man that has been urged by his own Bible-trained conscience to take a stand for real truth and to tell his story. As you will see from the following video and others like it, Ray Franz, a former governing body member of the Watchtower Society, had a pure motive for exposing the inner workings of the Watchtower Society. I first heard about Ray Franz in the early 80s. I was new to the organization. I heard one of the elders talking about how he, Ray Franz, and someone in the writing department had written their own ideas into the James book, and that was published by the Watchtower Society. I was a bit confused since I really knew nothing about the inner workings of the governing body. But I got the idea that Ray was labeled an apostate, and that's really the first time I came to understand what that term means, and I had been baptized for a couple years. Later, I heard that he wrote a book, and we were never to look at that book. I once had occasion, on a cleaning job in someone's home, where one of the people working with me brought to my attention that she had found an apostate book on a bookshelf. I told her, "Put it back, don't even look at it." I don't know if it was Crisis of Conscience. But I can tell you that I am deeply sorry that I shut my mind down that day. I refused to even look at that book. Had I just read the book, I might not be in the shoes I am in today in the process of trying to save my family from being torn apart. In the foreword to Crisis of Conscience, Ray Franz lists some quotes, and I'll just read a little bit of those. It says, "We always refuse to be called by any other name than that of our head, Christians." Also, it says, "Beware of organization. It is wholly unnecessary. The Bible rules will be the only rules you will need. Do not seek to bind others' consciences, and do not permit others to bind yours." These are quotes taken from early Watchtower Society writings. Many Jehovah's Witnesses consider early Watchtower writings as old light, old information, not relevant to today's doctrine. But really, the Bible itself was written thousands of years ago, by men who lived in another land, in a whole nother culture. And yet, do you consider the Bible as old light, old information that somehow has no relevance to Christian doctrine? Of course not. The Watchtower organization cannot claim to be God's channel of communication on earth, God's chosen people, and then create doctrine that later on they can say has no significance. You don't erase doctrine. What do we call these kinds of organizations or these kinds of governments? Organizations that change history to support their current agenda, that filter information to support their current beliefs. Don't we call them high control groups, manipulative, dishonest, caring little about individual rights to accurate information? These are the reasons why I encourage anyone interested in accurate information to read Ray Franz's book, Crisis of Conscience, for an unbiased, inside examination of the Watchtower organization. Ray goes on to quote from a 1974 Watchtower, a January 15th issue, page 35. In his book, he writes, "When persons are in great danger from a source that they do not suspect or are being misled by those they consider their friends, is it an unkindness to warn them? They may prefer not to believe the warning. They may even resent it. But does that free one from the moral responsibility to give that warning?" I looked up that article in the Watchtower Library, and it's titled, "Can You Be True to God and Yet Hide the Facts?" The Watchtower goes on to say, "What results when a lie is let go unchallenged? Does not silence help the lie to pass as truth? And who primarily objected to Jesus' declaration of the truth? Wasn't it the religious leaders? Do you believe that lies should not go unchallenged? Perhaps you agree that wrongdoing should be exposed, but what if wrongdoing is done by religious people, perhaps persons in your own religion?" Of course, that information was written by the Watchtower Society to support their own belief that people in the organization should report one another. But what they don't realize is their very writings prove that they themselves should be exposed. Oftentimes within the Watchtower's own writings, you can find information that points to them as the ones passing off lie as truth. And this is an excellent article in the 1974 Watchtower, January 15th. I would encourage anyone to read that for themselves. But apply it to, in general, to the idea that you cannot keep silent and let a lie pass as truth. Thomas Jefferson said that all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent, and that's something Ray Franz would not do. He speaks in his book of a defining moment. He says when one's conscience comes to a point of crisis. I know what that defining moment is. It's when truth comes pounding on your door, shouting, "It's the truth." The moment when you either open the door to that truth or you just slam it shut. Some people spend their whole life, Ray says, in a morally sitting posture. He says, but when all's said and done, and when life finally draws near to its close, it would seem that the one who can say, "At least I stood for something," must feel greater satisfaction than the one who rarely stood for anything. In his book, he goes on to say, when the cost is very great, we find ourselves at a moral crossroads situation, facing a genuine crisis in our lives. He says this book is about that kind of crisis, the way people are facing up to it and the effect on their lives. I can attest to that moment of crisis. I'm now facing that kind of crossroad. That's why I can't reveal my identity yet. But my determination is to rescue my entire family from the grasp of the Watchtower organization. And that is not going to be easy. And it's rarely done. But I know that if I reveal my identity and I am disfellowshipped, I will lose all communication with my children. I will lose hope in helping them out of this organization. I made what I consider a very grave mistake in raising my children in a cult-like organization. And I know you can't change the past, but if I'm able to change the probable outcome of raising my children in this cult, if I can change the results of that, then that will suffice.